When you don't take time to look at it through other people's eyes. Take some time and reflect on what you believe in your soul. Cause that is the key to life. You gotta let the negativity go.
Hello, and welcome to What the Fox podcast. Today, you are going to be hearing myself, Lindsey Fox, and Amber Ross deconstruct the social norm around resiliency and positivity. This is a unique topic because we often associate lots of positive stuff with these two topics.
Often my whole life, you say the word resilient and I'm like, yes, I am that. And that is a good thing. Until you brought this topic up. And then I started going down like so many fun rabbit holes on what resiliency looks like and like what brings it on and just all of with everything in life, there's good and bad, right? There's no,
Totally.
you can't say one thing is 100% good ever about anything.
Right. I mean, all or nothing thinking is no bueno. We don't want that.
No bueno.
we don't right. need all or nothing thinking because that really just kind of skews everything. But yeah, so I mean, really today we're going to be talking a lot about, toxic positivity and the different, ways that resiliency can be both helpful and unhelpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, so you say the word resiliency and I think immediately of like, this is a quote unquote superpower. Like it is an asset in life to be able to bounce back, to be able to pivot, to be able to feel the pressures of the outside world and not allow it to stall you out. Like that's not saying that you never take a break. It's not saying you never like assess the situation or acknowledge the fact that something is hard, but just to say, yep, that is hard, but it's not going to stop me. And to me, like that's the story of resilience in my mind, where it has a good impact on society. Because I mean, sure, if you think about anybody who's ever accomplished anything good for our world, like it didn't come easily. Nothing right. comes without a struggle, I guess, is the way I've always seen it. Mm-hmm. But nothing comes without a struggle also kind of like leads you down a deep, dark path of everything should be hard. Otherwise it's not worth it, which is also not true.
I mean, it is true. I get what you're saying and you're right. And, in all fairness, like resiliency I have been described as being resilient for my entire life. And you have said too, like this has been, it's a trait or, an adjective that gets thrown around like it's a massive compliment. And I think at times it really is a compliment. I mean,
at times.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about your perspective around maybe like the positive influence of resiliency in your life as it pertained to kind of like helping you climb the ladders in your corporate world and all that jazz, how it was like a positive thing for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of an easy picture in my mind. Like I joined, I'm trying to figure out where to start, like a logical starting point, because resilience has been like the theme of my life. But if I think about my most recent career moves, I tended to take the jobs no one else wanted, or, the sales patch no one else wanted because it was going to be hard. Like I always sort of joked around with folks on my team to say that I was the one brought in to clean up messes, or I was the one brought in to clean up relationship problems, or not relationship like marriage, but
like organizational communication
things. I was the cleanup crew, the fixer that could come in and make all the things work. Yes. So I gravitated towards these jobs that no one else wanted, which made me a desirable employee because people knew, oh, nobody wants to do that thing. Amber will do it. Like, don't worry, put Amber in. Yes. Go have her do the thing, which helped me by getting my name out, by getting,
sure. I can see that.
People talk
in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Managers and directors and executives, they talk in the hallways, and it's common to say,
Excuse me.
there was this rough situation, no problem. There was this challenge, and this person, which in this case me, overcame that challenge or was willing to even step in and try. I'm not saying every time I stepped in it worked flawlessly, because I'm not a magician, but I was willing to do the thing and not let it hold me back, which
Right.
helped me to push my career forward and helped me to be able to take positions that on paper I might not have been a good fit for, but seeing my history, seeing my past work, seeing the way I approach issues and resolutions gave me a leg up over other folks that I was competing against.
A
So for
hundred
me,
percent.
it's been a good, in a lot of ways, has been a good part of my life and a good part of my career aspects.
Sure. And so I actually think you're highlighting something that is really valuable in the sense that now I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole because I feel like
Let's
I can't
go.
I feel like I can't make like the one sentence statement without having like a slew of other things coming out at you. So
This is the story of our
yes.
lives.
Yes,
Yes.
it is. Yes. But resiliency is something that we develop arguably in childhood. I believe that
Mhm.
it's something that during childhood, that is when we begin to develop a sense of resiliency.
Yes.
And, so we learn to, well, ideally and optimally, we learn to adapt and we learn to adjust and overcome. And, we learn how to navigate hard things. And as we move forward into our teen years and into adulthood and that sort of thing, I definitely agree that those lessons learned, because resiliency implies that there are, in fact, lessons learned,
Yeah.
that when we enter the world of employment, then yes, resiliency can actually be pretty kick-ass because it can actually lead you to, retaining employment or even moving your way up in the rankings to, get higher wages or have a more prestigious title or whatever that thing is. Um, but I think I want to go a little bit deeper into
Yeah.
where that I want to say like family of origins type of thing problem comes with that. And it's because like in childhood, when we think about the role of attachment between a child and a caregiver, we think about the relationship, the emotional dance between a parent and a child and kind of what that looks like. So
Hmm.
in theory, a healthy emotional dance or a secure attachment would come with like a sense of balance in terms of that connectivity to one another, where the parent would emotionally attune to the child's needs of, maybe needing the bottle or to be rocked or to be cared for at a young age.
Hmm.
Um, to, as they get older, you can anticipate when your child is feeling, sad or scared or lonely or in need of some comfort. Um, but that's with an optimally functioning caregiver and child relationship. That's like within a
Sure.
secure attachment. So, we're talking about a perfect family dynamic, but
Doesn't
let's be real.
exist. Doesn't
Right.
doesn't exist.
That's that's right. I mean, so, when we think about secure attachment, it's actually not as common as people might think because at the end of the day, we all have our own shit. And,
Yeah.
there's plenty of generational shit to go around over and over from cycle to cycle. So, when we look at that, it comes back to learning, or even us as human beings reflecting on what did we learn at a young age to help us be more adaptive in childhood. So, AKA, when I use
Okay.
adaptive, we can replace that with resilient.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, through, whatever kind of connection seeking measures to get your need met from that caregiver. And I guess in my brain, I'm thinking, oftentimes when we think about certain types of attachment, maybe a child learned in order to get their emotional needs met, they needed to be like a people pleaser and to do what their parent wanted them to
Mm.
do.
Mhm.
and to do like, make the really good grades,
Yeah.
clean the house, go above and beyond with the chores.
I'm sorry. I laugh because the good grades were never part of my story. It was always a part of the try, but it was never a part of the actual story.
That's
But
okay.
no, I get that. And I can see that in my own story. Like I always wanted my parents to be proud of me. I always wanted to be able to
Every child does.
achieve
Yeah.
and, be able to do that. So yeah, and I know I've shared with you in the past, I have people pleasing tendencies that I'm still working on and things that like
Oh yeah,
I'm
I mean, it's hard
actively,
shit. Same here.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's hard stuff to move through. And the thing is that and of course I'm gonna bring up trauma because this is just
yeah,
kind of again
because
a
it's part of
thing.
life, right?
Yeah. But when we think about, typically when we hear about the fight, flight, or freeze response, there's also
Mm,
something called the fawn response. And it
mm-hmm.
doesn't really get as much attention for whatever reason. But the fawn trauma response, or when we are perceiving a threat of some kind, our go-to is to kick in that survival mode of engaging in some people pleasing tendencies of like, how
Yeah,
can I soothe this threat? And I'm going to choose to soothe the threat by being accommodating and people pleasing.
because it's
um
going to keep me alive. Yes,
yeah,
like in our
right.
brains, not like
Mhm.
the reality is
Sure. So
different,
when you
but
think about different levels of insecure attachment patterns in
mm-hmm.
childhood and, depending on what kind of environment someone grew up in, you can see where that fawn response would kind of um, lay out a foundation at a young age to build what we then identify as resiliency.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all very connected. And I can see how, like, for my story, the majority of my resilience has helped me and has been helpful and has been an asset. But
Yeah,
there are areas of my story that are not that. I certainly stayed in working relationships that were unhealthy for much longer than necessary
sure. Same
because,
here. Of
yeah,
course,
I mean,
absolutely.
so I can see how it could take a negative spin and put you in a toxic and very unhealthy situation or even a harmful situation because you have that need to be resilient. And if we put such an emphasis on that,
Mhm.
that's when it becomes really unhealthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just it, is that if for whatever, if we have grown accustomed to our caregiver or our teacher or our coach, our employer, whatever it is, or our partner, where everyone keeps saying, like, I don't know how you did this. Oh my gosh, you
Mm,
were so strong. You were so
yeah.
resilient. It is actually training you to be dismissive of actually how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's training you to stay quiet, for lack of better words, because then there's this expectation on you to
That
be
you always have to be
resilient.
strong. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, honestly, this is something that I know I've mentioned this before, but um when I think about that, I also think about like really like professions such as like law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
fire department. I mean, being a firefighter, it just any of these heroic positions,
Yeah.
and resiliency. We couple them, hand in hand
When
when
it's all about expectations. And you have said previously, expectations are setting yourself up for, I don't remember the exact quote. Expectate.
expectations can be premeditated resentments.
Yeah. And I feel like
Mm.
it exists here as well. So other people are putting their expectations on us to be strong, to be resilient, to be able to bounce back, to be able to, you know, always be that steady, whatever. So then we adopt that on ourselves and say, well, I always have to be this. So then I can't feel XYZ. So I'm not allowed to um stop. I'm not allowed to have a setback. I'm not allowed to give up on a
Mhm.
goal. I'm not allowed, like, I can see how that leads straight into perfectionism and just swirls into a whole other world of problems.
Oh yeah, girl. It definitely can. And that's where, I think if we're kind of dismissing that piece, this is where that toxic positivity flows right
Hmm.
into the conversation as well. Because a big part of, well, maybe we should just take a moment to define what it is.
Yeah,
Because
I think
I
that's a good
think,
idea.
right, because I think sometimes people think of being mentally healthy as being positive all the time, having a positive mindset all the time, and that no matter how hard the thing is, you're supposed to have a positive mindset. And, frankly, I've had people describe me my entire life as like, Lindsay, you are such a positive person. You are such a positive person. And while I am a very positive person, I'm also incredibly realistic about
Hmm.
life and the shit that goes down in life. And the fact that um, sometimes painful things are simply painful. And
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that there's just a positive that you have to lean into. Sometimes it just fucking hurts.
Yeah.
And you have to sit in the fact that it hurts. Um, and so whenever I think about the toxic positivity piece, it's a way of like minimizing those emotions of those
Yeah.
uncomfortable moments, those uncomfortable emotions. It's minimizing their existence, and it's like having a sense of guilt and or shame for experiencing negative emotions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And I think I I consider myself a very positive person, a very optimistic person. And
Hmm.
that is a, I don't even know what to call it for me, but it's just like my heart, my mind, like that is my primary go-to function in life. That doesn't mean that I don't see negative things, doesn't mean that I don't hurt. It doesn't mean that I don't
Of
experience,
course, you're still
setbacks.
human.
Yeah, I'm 100% human. Like, but for me, it means I choose not to sit in the shit. Like, I choose to pick myself up out of it,
Mhm.
do what I need to do, and move on. Like, acknowledge the thing, give it a name, call it out. Like, it exists, but I'm also not going to like keep that 10 pounds on my back for the next 30 miles because that's setting myself up for failure. And that for me, that's how my positive outlook in life kind of goes toward. But I can certainly see all of the sides because you and I've talked about, the toxic positivity culture of Instagram, of Facebook, of social media in general, and of even just like person to person communication because
Yeah.
we're so fearful of sharing the real stuff for because somebody's going to judge us or because somebody's going to think less of us or because
Hmm.
heaven forbid we give our enemy ammunition to use against us that might be real. Like these
Right.
all these all cause
Vulnerability.
us to just be fake
Vulnerability
and
is
not
scary.
yeah, it is, but it's so like that's where life happens. If you don't
Hmm.
have like I'm not advocating for you to put all of your information out for the entire world because that is not a safe space in my mind, but like having a person or people you trust that you can be real with is imperative. Like it's not just important, like that's critical to human existence in my opinion.
It is. I mean, it's absolutely critical for human existence. But I mean, I think a big part is, um, you know, it not just being one or two people that you're being real
Yeah.
with. I think that a key part is standing in your space, being exactly who you are at all times. As in like it's okay to have a shitty day. I don't
Yeah,
care if you're at
100%.
work, I don't care if you're at school or in your family dynamic or your relationship, but holding space for just like the human experience of suffering. And I believe I've talked about this on a previous episode, but I do believe that the only way to experience true, authentic joy is by knowing and sitting with suffering.
Mm,
Um, I really do believe that without suffering, we cannot know joy.
yeah.
And if we sit in this space of like constantly everything, the glass is always half full. We are always finding the positive in every single situation, and we're minimizing the threat, minimizing the suffering, minimizing the uncomfortable feelings that exist in life, then we are depriving ourselves of reality, which
Yeah. Well,
also
and it's also
means,
exhausting.
oh,
Like,
right, because you're lying to yourself. I mean, you're
yeah.
lying to yourself, you're lying to others. And then, when we think about this also going back to like even upbringing and childhood and all of this psych stuff with this, when we put on this facade for our children,
Hmm.
we are perpetuating cycles of perfectionism, or having them like have this idea of these unrealistic standards that can't be met because we're constantly moving the goalpost.
Yeah.
There is nothing, these standards they're not achievable because they're not realistic, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a hard balancing act, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
society tells us, we all have it hard. Get over it, right? If what is it that everybody likes to say when life gives you lemons, make lemonade? I'm like, okay, first of all, this is the
I say make a
worst.
margarita myself, but
Well, yes, I would rather have the margarita than the lemonade, but also like I think this need and this feeling that when something is bad, you have to do something about it also perpetuates the problem. Like it is also okay to have a bad day and just have a bad day and
yeah.
not go off on a rant and not take it out on other people and not take it out on yourself and not, turn to unhealthy habits. It's also okay to just like acknowledge the bad day and move on. Like I know it's not always possible. Bad
Yeah.
stuff happens and you have to like do the thing, but not every time you get a lemon you have to have lemonade, right? Sometimes you just kind of have to set that lemon back down and walk away.
I mean, or you just have to suck on the lemon and sit with the discomfort. I
That
mean,
too.
because that's exactly what it's all about, is that sometimes with the suffering, we have to look at that. And that's where, I don't know, whenever I think about when we experience like drastic mood shifts,
Yeah.
it's important to kind of like check in with yourself every now and again and be like, damn, why did I get so angry about that? Or why did I get so flustered with that situation? Or why did that sentence make me feel this way? Or
Yeah.
how come when that person did whatever, I automatically felt like a sense of, sadness or guilt or whatever it was. I think sometimes we have to sit in that discomfort because that's what forces us to grow and to kind of reflect on our part in situations, or maybe things that
Mm-hmm.
we haven't worked through, that we need to pause and give a little bit more attention to. Um, but I think when we are hyper focusing on that, like living up to these expectations of being resilient and being strong, because Lord knows that has been my role in life forever,
Yeah.
um, it is, it can be incredibly damaging. It can be incredibly damaging.
Not
Um,
only to yourself.
Oh, right. To every it's just damaging as a whole. I mean, to
Yeah.
yourself and to others, because again, you're you're suppressing parts of your identity that are then not even being seen or heard by yourself. If you don't feel like it's okay to kind of just be true and standing in your own power of who you are
Mm-hmm.
and how you're feeling and all that stuff. Um, and that's where, whenever I bring in the toxic positivity piece, I really do believe it contributes to keeping people oppressed.
So tell
Um,
me more about that. Because you've said this is not the first time we've talked about toxic positivity, full disclosure to everyone that's listening. But I want to hear more about this because we haven't really dug past that sentence.
well, I mean, I think it's exactly what it sounds like, in the sense that when we are constantly kind of giving this impression that everything is always going to be okay, which, I do think that there's there's some balance in this. Sometimes
Yeah.
shitty situations are just shitty.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that when we kind of have this idea of like blind optimism, it can be, it can, marginalizes and minimizes the way um, people's real lives actually are. You know, when you think about certain populations or lifestyles
Hmm.
or cultural norms or ways of being that you actually have very little control of changing, maybe because of systemic issues. I'm just going to throw out systemic racism, for example, but
Yeah.
like, structural issues, policies, politics, broken neighborhoods or whatever. When we're kind of like forcing this idea of positivity
Mm.
of, um, you know, you can choose your own hard. That's not always true. It's not always true that you can
Yeah.
choose your own hard. You can choose how you perceive something
Yeah.
with some digging. You can choose that, but there are certain components of life that you can't choose. And those variables might really fucking suck.
Yeah. True story.
I mean, truly, when you think about some of it, where um, maybe a person can't get out of their poverty stricken lifestyle and they're stuck in that space, and maybe in high school they have to quit high school so that they can afford to pay the bills for their family, and
Hmm.
get a job and drop out, and then of course that keeps you in that same cycle if you keep living out
Yeah.
the rest of your life like that. So there's just, I can think of a lot of different, you know, types of people where that kind of, pushing that will to be constantly happy, constantly minimizing the fact that
Hmm.
there's some really painful shit going on. It takes away from a human experience that is very valid and um, painful for
Yeah.
some people.
Yeah. And I mean, I think anytime we get into a situation where we're comparing experiences or we're comparing outlooks or we're comparing, we all have our own unique perception of a situation. Like you and I could witness the
Yeah,
same thing and we would have two very different takes
of course.
on how it happened or how it
Mhm.
impacted us or, how we're affected. So anytime we find ourselves in a situation where we say, well, I did it this way, so you should do it that way. I'm thinking of
Mhm.
like some of the positive stuff I've seen. I'm going to put positive in air quotes. I've seen on social media, like, well, when this happens, you just do that, you know,
Mhm.
like, yes, that
Thinking
was your story. Yes,
right.
yes, that worked for you. I'm glad that worked for you.
Mhm.
However, this is not like, that doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily a healthy way to do it because sometimes those coping mechanisms and like the stuff I see online, I'm like, that is not like,
Yeah, it might have worked for you, buddy, but it's not gonna work that way for me.
yeah.
And
And our minds work differently. Our bodies work differently. Our like nervous systems work differently. Like, it's just, it's a unique human individual experience. And I think that we run into issues when we try to put people in boxes and when we try to put situations and um, resolutions or paths forward into like, this is the way
yeah,
that it's done. Like,
but
it's the
likewise
answer's
not,
obvious.
I mean,
Go ahead.
yes, and not acknowledging the differences is also equally damaging,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know? And so while putting people in boxes can, feel some kind of a way within the certain context, not acknowledging that those differences exist can be just as harmful, if not more harmful at times. And that's where I think that toxic positivity oppresses certain people under, various conditions or whatever. because we might just enter with this blanket mindset of
Mm,
you can do it and everything's going to be just fine. And you're going to, let's focus on this. I know that you don't have, food, shelter, or water, but let's focus on this. And it's just
yeah.
like, bitch, are you crazy? Like, what?
The answer is
Like, have you not
yes.
seen the environment here? I'm sorry, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs makes it extremely clear that we need
Yeah.
to start out with getting our basic needs met of like the food, shelter, water, having, and then
Yeah.
you kind of can move on to, the human connection piece, and belonging, and working your way up from there. But I feel like if we're not acknowledging that piece, we're missing out on some very core elements of the human experience and connection.
Yeah. And I mean, in the process, we're damaging and making people feel less than just because their experience is different. Like I know um, something we've been working on in this household is identifying feelings. So like,
Affect identification, that's what we call it clinically.
well, it's interesting to me because it all came about, oddly enough, because of social media. But I saw a post that said like the average human could identify 6 emotions or something, when in
Mhm.
reality, there's like 70 emotions. I'm using general terms. I don't actually know the numbers, full disclosure. But in my mind, what was important was I need to do a better job of one, identifying my own emotions, and two, helping my kids learn how to identify more than, 6 emotions, because that's not a full human experience and it's not healthy. So it's something that we've started digging into. And you'll forgive me because I do, while I like details, sometimes they become irrelevant to my stories. So numbers may be off, but it's fine. But in realizing that, I have found in myself how often I mislabel feelings, emotions,
Yes.
problems. And like once they get mislabeled, they go into a box to be dealt with later, and then it never gets dealt with. And I
Yeah,
think
girl.
that like that's part of my resiliency, because I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'm going to put it over there. And like, we're
Avoidance.
just
You're
going to keep
right.
going.
That's what
Yeah,
resiliency is.
it's
Avoidance. I
avoidance.
mean,
100%. I'm like, I don't know what this is. It doesn't seem to be helping me. So we're going to put it over there and we're just going to keep moving forward. So, like, I'm an imperfect human. We're all imperfect humans, but it's interesting to me that, like, this is common. Like, this is the norm, to not be able to label your own emotions
yes, it
and to
is.
know how you're feeling and to know why you're feeling that way.
Right. I mean, so actually, a few weeks ago, we did an episode on where we were talking about the difference between jealousy and envy.
Yes.
And so that's like a perfect example of like when you're labeling something like, oh, I'm so jealous. And actually, what you meant was like, no, I'm actually feeling envious. um,
Yeah.
and so affect
Mind
identification.
blown in that one, by the way.
Right, but it's because we don't like using the right term once we do figure it out, because then it feels yucky. But with oh, I'm sorry, I just had a little visitor pop over
I was
here.
going
I
to
got
say,
a little
how's Lulu?
she just popped over to say hello. Um oh boy, that just messed up my whole train of thought because she came over here
That,
for some loving. But I was gonna say, you know, and one aspect of the treatment modality I use as a therapist is called ARC, and it is a trauma-informed approach that focuses on attachment, regulation, and competency. And a
mm,
big part of ARC is doing the work around affect identification. So teaching people, keep in mind I work with families, so I work with
mhm,
children and
yeah.
parents. And so, teaching families about affect identification also means working with not just the child, but the caregiver, and helping the
Mhm.
caregiver be able to identify and label not just their child's emotions, but focusing on how to identify their own emotions. Because if you can't identify your own emotions, how can you emotionally attune to your child's needs?
You can't.
Bingo.
Yeah. Full stop.
Right. I mean,
You can't.
you just have to, so you have to do that work, which as human beings, we don't naturally like go to the space of thinking like how simple yet complex that is.
And let me tell you, before we started digging into it, I thought I had a pretty good grasp on my emotions as a human. And what I'm finding is that that is not the case at all. And I have quite a bit of work to do, which is,
Hey,
I'm
don't
a
we all,
lifelong
sister?
learner. I love to learn. I love to dig into stuff and like help and share information. So it's all in my mind. I'm going to look at this glass half full. It's all goodness that I get to do the work. But also, I'm like, shit, man, I'm like in my 30s. I thought I had this figured out.
Oh gosh, I feel like that's life for you in a nutshell, though. It's like as soon as we
Yeah.
think that we've got something figured out, we don't know shit. And let us never forget that, because the moment we actually do have it all figured out, we're lying to ourselves and we must have stopped growing.
Yes. Yeah. And I agree because you've stopped digging and you've stopped analyzing and you've stopped looking for ways that you can do things differently. But, that goes back to society telling us we're never good enough. So you kind of have to balance things in all things. I think the devil comes into the um, exaggeration or the taking things to extremes and feeling like you have to show up
Mhm.
perfectly in every instance and that you're not allowed to make a mistake or have
Yeah,
a setback or, anything like that. So
right.
there's space for both.
I agree. I definitely agree.
I know we've kind of like gone down a couple of rabbit holes in this, but I think our goal today was just to get y'all thinking about resilience in a different way because it can be a good thing. It can absolutely aid you in different areas of your life and help you to move forward. But when taken to extremes, it can hurt you and it can hurt others and it can create and continue patterns which we don't want to continue as a society.
Yes, absolutely. And, on that is also about the aspect of positivity is, we hope that this episode has helped to increase your own sense of awareness around uh, the appropriateness around when to use positivity as a way to, influence or inspire or what have you, because um, the context always matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important to just, take a moment to really think about a person's experience, um, and have compassion for their experience and understand that it might not be an experience that needs that extreme level of positivity. Sometimes we just need some compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. I can
Yeah.
think of one of those experiences this week between you and I in the walk. I was ecstatic that you went for a 30-minute walk. But I can
Oh
see
yeah.
how like if you look at that in the
Wait
context
a
of
minute.
this
I
conversation.
was gonna say,
No, go
let me
ahead.
just share. Let me share what happened though,
Yes,
so our
please.
audience knows what happened. So as y'all are probably aware, if you've listened to our first couple episodes, my sweet Lulu has a brain tumor, and she is in the end stages of life, and she's just in a space and where I really don't like leaving the home. I don't like
Mhm.
leaving her home alone. So for me, I have committed to being home more or less like 24/7. And she was recently discharged from the hospital due to some things that took place. And so I was able to get out of the house and take like a 30-minute walk, and was so grateful for just being able to take some time to myself.
And
And
like in my mind, that is huge. Like
so I
I
texted
don't,
Amber. So I
yes.
texted Amber this.
And of course, me being the ever positive optimist creature that I am, I responded back with, I think, what, three or four exclamation points. And like, truly, I will share with you in that moment, I was ecstatic that you got out in the sunshine and like, whether there was sun or not is irrelevant. But the fact that you got 30 minutes of fresh air, I was like, yes, friend. Like, that is phenomenal. But also, like, I probably could have approached that differently and not just like thrown my positivity all over you.
I got
Um,
Amber's response was amazing with three exclamation points after. And I'm like, girl, if you're texting me amazing with three exclamation points at the end, I better be telling you something a lot more exciting than I went for a walk.
well, and I think in fairness, like you have to understand my levels of excitement. Three exclamation points is pretty low on my level of excitement. Like, I get that for some people that's a lot, but that's moderate for me. But I say that to say, like, even in simple conversation, these are things we can take notice of. We can approach situations and be mindful and be respectful. And I'm sharing this in jest because I don't think that you were offended by me sending you 3 exclamations.
Definitely not. I think that if I were offended that easily, this podcast would not exist.
Right? Oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine. But there are opportunities in day-to-day conversation, in interaction with humans, that we can take a pause to evaluate what we're saying before we say it.
Yeah. I mean, I think stop and think, right? And actually, like in this situation, I don't think the situation with us and me going on a walk, that's not really applicable in that sense. But yeah, as a key takeaway for, people in general, yeah, just stop and think before you speak.
Yeah.
This was a huge issue for me growing up, by the way. I know it's shocking to actually think that. Yes, I've always just shot from the hip, but in the same breath, yes, you do need to think before you
With
speak.
compassion.
Yeah, with especially when there are some sensitive topics at play or whatever the situation is. But yes, I get it. I too, I think I can attribute this as well to just how my ADHD works, man. If I do not spit it out sometimes when it is on my mind, I'm going to forget. And if I do not have a notepad to write it down, I'm just like, oh my gosh, there it goes. It just flew out. It just
Like, it just went right out the window. It's gone. Bye.
It
But
either
here's
went
the
out the
good news.
window
At 2
or it
a.m.
went
it'll
out my
come back.
mouth.
Oh my gosh, this was fun. I'm grateful that, Lindsey, this was an awesome topic idea. I'm grateful that you threw it out there on the table for something that we could chat about. And I hope that our listeners learned something new today, maybe a new perspective, or perhaps you'll be like me and you'll go down a very interesting rabbit hole on the interwebs. So have fun with that if you do.
That is very true. So with that, I would love to encourage our listeners to please remember that we also have a YouTube channel. I know that we
Yes.
never talk about this, but we actually
Yes.
have a YouTube channel. I know I kind of forget that we
Fun
have
fact.
it too. I'm not gonna lie, but
Fun
I feel
fact.
like we need to start. I feel like we need to start promoting it a little bit because, like, frankly, we don't have hardly any subscribers on there because all of our listeners listen on like the podcast platforms, like Spotify, Apple, and Google, whatever. So, we would like to encourage you to, please subscribe if you are a YouTube person and share with your
Yes.
friends. And
if you want to benefit from our hilarious facial expressions and all of the things that you don't see when you're listening to us, I highly encourage you because it's fun.
Yeah, you get to see a whole new level of Lindsey and Amber.
All the times that we resist the urge to interrupt one another.
It's true. It's true. And maybe on the audio recording it just comes off a little bit better. Like we can play it off, but no, you can see our real live time facial expressions and what happens. But please follow us subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. And then I'm happy to report that we have also kind of expanded our social media presence on our personal accounts whenever it comes to LinkedIn. Oh gosh, I about aged the hell out of myself. I about said
Lord.
Oh, okay, guys. Snapchat is what I was trying to say.
Were you going to say snapfish?
Yes! You guys, do y'all remember Snapfish? You guys.
Yeah. You were going to say snapfish. I love it. Okay, so we are not old. We are aging like fine wine and we are amazing, but find us on Snapchat, on TikTok, on all the places. If you are enjoying following along with us, which we hope you are. We hope that you're having fun. We hope that you're learning and that you're growing. And Lindsey's losing it. But
Snapfish,
I do want to
guys. Snapfish. Come on.
I cannot. But please, if you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, if you have an idea, if you have something that you think is worthy of sharing, send us a message on any of the platforms, by email, whatever you're comfortable doing, because I think we would love to take on a challenge and just see where it leads us.
Absolutely. We love a good solid challenge. All right,
I love
guys.
it. Bye,
See you
y'all.
next
Thank you.
Tuesday.
And we all sing, everything is gonna be just fine. It's gonna fall into place. The sun is gonna set on your terrible day.